And by the way, I'm putting these videos on YouTube and then putting them on Edmodo. So if you have any problems like seeing it on Edmodo, because some people have been and I don't know why, then you can just go to YouTube and just type in Mrs. Nation's History. It's all one word, Mrs. Nation's History, and then it comes up. So anyway, it's been working for me. I haven't had any problems. Yeah, awesome. Okay, because these are so thrilling. And yes, here we go. Okay. All right, I'm going to move this out of the way so you can see stuff. Okay, all we got to hope for, too, is that, we don't lose the toolbar and all that mess, which then I'll have to come back here and deal with. Okay, the very first thing that I need to write on here that is not included in the notes, and it's really important that you understand. So, people are getting confused, too. Like, if I start writing on the board, people don't write down any of this information either. You need this information, too. And obviously, you need to shorten it. I mean, you don't have to write it word for word. You know what I'm saying? And then what I add, you might want to jot that down too in your own little form called notes, which means notation. So you're shortening things in your own special way. Okay. So here's what you need to know. Adams is obviously our second president. And the way that we ran elections for George Washington and for John Adams is that, let's say, 5 people want to run for president. Well, they all run for president, and we all vote on who we want for president, right? And the person who gets the most votes is the president. And the person who gets the second most votes is the vice president. Which in the election of George Washington, that always worked out, because George Washington got the most, and then Adams got second, right?
Wait, no one else voted for anyone else, right?
Right, exactly.
But then was there only 2 people running?
There were only 2 people running in George Washington's case.
But what if there was 3?
If there were 3, then that would have been a problem. And I don't know what they would have done. It's a good question. It worked out great with George, right? Because John and George were both from essentially similar political viewpoints. Now, this is going to get confusing. There were no political parties yet while George was around, because Washington didn't believe in political parties and wouldn't allow them to be formed. But if you had to dissect their political thoughts, Adams and Washington agreed on most things in terms of politics. Okay? So, works out okay. John Adams comes along, and he gets first place. In the voting. And then, the person who gets second place is Thomas Jefferson. So that means that John Adams is the president, and Thomas Jefferson is the VP. The problem is that when Washington leaves office, political parties do form. Thomas Jefferson is a Republican, and John Adams is a Federalist. You have 2 gentlemen from 2 different political parties who have 2 very divergent ways of thinking about politics and life. Yes?
Wait. Am I thinking wrong, or did Abraham Lincoln form the Democratic Party, or was that he formed something?
Okay. I'm going to be really transparent and blow your mind. These guys were referred to as Democratic Republicans. Yes. But I try not to tell people that because it's confusing. And then Lincoln forms the Republican Party that we know of today. Okay? All right. Okay, so now that you're like, what? Okay, the main thing, though, that you need to understand is that we've got a problem here, because these 2 guys don't jive, yet they're going to have to try to lead the government together. Okay? And so, John Adams' administration already starts off badly because of this. The other problem with him, as it shares in the secondary source that you looked at yesterday, is that he's very smart, but he is bad with people. The bottom line is he's got a bad personality. He was very blunt. Now, I don't mind blunt, but you got to know when to talk and when not to talk, and when to shut up. You know what I'm saying? He didn't know that. So he'd get started talking to you about something, and you'd say, well, I think that we should do X, Y, and Z. And what he would do is he'd say, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. You're an idiot, right? The right thing is, da-da-da-da-da-da, and everybody knows that. You're the stupidest person I've ever met. Right? And he would just essentially skewer you and make you feel like you're about this tall. So, not good. Okay? Also kind arrogant, kind of thinks he's smart, and kind of condescending little poophead is what he is. So, he's different from George Washington. George Washington has kind of an element of humility. George Washington has he kind of knows when to shut up. You know what I'm saying? John, not so much. Okay, so those are the tensions that we've got going on. To go ahead and resolve this issue here, if you're wondering, what happens with this, election process. After this election of John Adams, we immediately write a constitutional amendment to prevent this from ever happening again because it's a big mess. So that's why today when you go and vote for president, you vote for the president and the vice president as a package deal. They run together. So that's why you had this last time, Romney and Ryan, right? And you voted on them together. Or Obama and Biden, and you voted on them together. So that you're sure that you have a VP and a president that are from the same political party. So this, we figured out, doesn't work very well. So it's after this that it changes back to the way it is today. Okay, now, what else happens? Adams keeps Washington's cabinet. What that means is he keeps Hamilton as Secretary of Treasury. Keeps Henry Knox as Secretary of War. So whoever is there when Washington leaves is there when John Adams
But did they change that then?
Yes.
Like all of it?
Yes. So you could put new people in. The Constitution allows for that. He chooses to not. Okay? Now, here's the other thing you need to know. The same foreign affairs issues that Washington dealt with, he's dealing with. Okay? Britain is still at war with France. The French Revolution is still happening, but it's about to end. Okay? And so the big issue is that France wants us to help here and wants us to help here, and John Adams says no. His cabinet says we should help. John Adams says no way. Okay? So, this makes the French angry. We also have not paid them for the debt from the American Revolution. So that just adds more fuel to the fire between us and them. Realize that? Okay? So he's really dealing with some similar issues here. Yeah. On the next one, let's see if. Now, here's the bizarre crap that we're about to talk about. We're going to talk about three strange things with this guy, with John Adams. The XYZ affair, the quasi-war, which means fake war, and then we're going to talk about the Alien Sedition Act, which violate constitutional rights, and he supported it. So, wacky stuff going on with John Adams. First thing we're going to talk about is XYZ. Okay, we know that there are tensions between us and France. France wants us to help out. France wants us to pay off our debts to them, right? And we're saying, nope, can't help you, and we'll pay you here in a little bit. Just, keep your pants on, right? So France is like, oh, dang it. So France sends over 3 representatives to talk to us, okay? So they come over to America. We refer to these 3 representatives as X, Y, and Z. And these 3 representatives meet with John Adams, and they say, hey, we're pretty hacked off at you. You're not going to help us. You're not going to pay off your debt, so here's how we're going to handle dealing with you. We're not going to do business with you anymore. No more commercial dealings between France and the United States. Also, we are not going to communicate with you anymore. No more negotiations, no more assistance, essentially alliance over. And if you want anything from us, anything, you are going to have to pay us X amount of dollars. Essentially, they are forcing us to pay it like tribute or a bribe. Okay, now, when countries or kingdoms do this to others, this is an insult. You only do this to others that you consider lowly and nasty, right? So John Adams is angry to say the least. And essentially he says, X, Y, and Z, you 3 representatives, get your butts out. Forget it. I'm not going to participate in that kind of crap. Now, what he wants to do is now his feelings have changed, right? On the whole, let's not get involved with France. But instead of helping France, now his feelings are, let's take him down. Because this is bullcrap. what they're doing to us.
Or should they
So
talk
he
to
actually goes on an XYZ fever tour, and that's what they refer to it as. He goes on an XYZ fever tour throughout the 13 states and gives speeches. And what his whole goal in these speeches is to get the American people fired up and ginned up for war. And he literally encourages them to chant XYZ. So, I mean, he'll go out and give speeches, and at the end, they're going, XYZ, XYZ. And he lets the American people know, this is what France is doing to us. They are insulting us, they are disrespecting us, they're trying to bribe us, and this is wrong. Okay? Alright, so XYZ fever ends up funneling into this. Quasi is a fancy word for essentially fake. Okay? Here's what happened. John Adams is unsuccessful in his attempt to get full-on support for going to war with France. So what John Adams does is he just says, fine, if I don't get, because Congress has to approve any declaration of war. That's just in the Constitution. So Congress says, we will not approve any war declaration of France because you're crazy. And John Adams says, okay, fine, I'll just go ahead and have war anyway. So he sends out ships. He creates a navy, essentially, for this very purpose. We didn't have one. So he creates a navy. They go out into the Atlantic and just start attacking French ships. And the French attack back. And we go back and forth and back and forth. But neither one of us officially declare war on each other at all. And it lasts for about 2 years. The only thing that ends this mess is a little guy named Napoleon. Napoleon, here's what you need to know. The French Revolution eventually ends. And they do get rid of their king and queen. They get rid of them in the way of cutting their heads off. Okay? Which is awesome. Okay? The French Revolution is great. If you want to hear a good story and lots of blood and gore, it's a good one. Okay, so Napoleon is now in charge, and Napoleon says, what is this junk with America? What are we doing out here? And why? Because what does America have that I want? Nothing. Right? Do they have any money? Not really. Do they have a military I want? Not really. So Napoleon says, no, I want to take over Europe. Because, see, they have stuff. So I'm going to take over Europe first. And then, after that, if the United States is still around and I have an interest in it, then I'll go for them. But my first target is right here. So, quasi-war, done. Through with that. Because it's a waste of our resources. Okay? So that's over.
Wait, so they just stopped?
Just stopped. Just stopped.
Like just left the Atlantic?
Well, they didn't leave the Atlantic because that's also for merchant ships and stuff.
Well, we
But-
attacking England?
We decided to stop too.
Oh, it's done.
Yeah, so it's really dumb. It's stupid. Okay, so the next thing you need to know is Alien and Sedition Acts. That's a biggie. Obviously, there's a navy established, and I already told you that because that has to be done for the quasi-war to even be possible. Okay, with France. But this is the most disturbing. I mean, this is the one that makes me go, oh, this is bad. Okay? And let me tell you why this happens. The XYZ affair is partly responsible for this law, Alien and Sedition Acts. Okay? The other thing that's responsible for this law being passed is Republicans, or to be more specific, Democrat Republicans, right, start writing bad articles about John Adams in newspapers. Okay? So his opponents start slinging mud.
Could they be
What I mean. Pardon me?
Can't they be killed? For that now?
That's
Well, they would get arrested for that,
the
wouldn't they?
act. You have freedom of speech.
You're scaring me. Okay, stop and let me explain this before we confuse the crap out of everyone, Dawson West. Okay? Alright. Here's what happened. These Republicans are saying bad stuff about John Adams. He doesn't like it. John Adams also doesn't like that foreigners came over here and essentially bullied us around. So he has a real issue with foreigners after this. So here's what he does. Aliens refers to the foreigners. Sedition refers to the limiting of speech. So there are 2 points in the law. You're going to deport foreigners. And really what the law says is there doesn't have to be a reason. I mean, like, if T.J. Langley's from, I don't know, Germany, and I just decide I don't like the look of his face, and I'm part of law enforcement, I can just kick him out of the United States. Okay? Now, that's stupid and crazy, but this one is the most offensive. In the law that Adams writes up and submits to Congress, and Congress passes it. Okay? There's not just one guy in Congress. Okay? The majority says, yes, this is okay. You cannot speak out against the government. And if you do, you'll be thrown in jail. Okay? Now, there's a little problem with that. There's this little bitty thing called the First Amendment to the Constitution that says freedom of speech. Okay? But somebody was saying something bad about John Adams and he didn't like it. Okay. So, what is John Adams doing?
Mocking the Constitution.
Mocking the Constitution. Screw everything up. One person said this hour, he seems to be moving more in the direction of the king, while George Washington was trying to move away from that, right? And that seemed to be everything he was trying to do. It seems like John Adams is moving us closer this way, right? So, I mean, this is a law that obviously violates our constitutional rights. I will tell you that this law, after Adams is gone, gets nixed. Because you can't, this goes against the Constitution. Tell us.
Okay, so, George Washington is still the president, right?
No,
He's not?
no, John Adams is president now.
Oh.
He came in while we were talking about that. Okay, so this is under John Adams,
Okay.
term.
Do you care if, like, towards the end of class, I take the notes that I didn't get, from Will and print them off? Okay.
Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and move on. I believe we've got one more to take care of. But the Alien and Sedition Acts really, really bother me because that's just flat out not okay. Okay. All right. So you've got some government changes. 1800 Washington D.C. is done. So the whole time through Adams' administration, Washington D.C. is being built. And it's finally done, like right before he leaves office. Okay. Let's see. What else do you know? Oh, essay on your test is going to be this question. Which president do you think had the biggest impact on our nation and our government? Do you think it was George Washington, or do you think it was John Adams?
Is there a right
And
answer?
then there's no right or wrong answer as long as you provide evidence, and that's the rest of the question. The rest of the question is you have to give 3 changes that your chosen president caused, and then explain how those things cause change, right? Elaborate on them and back them up with information from the unit and evidence, okay? So you need to start thinking about that right now. What are you going to go with? Are you going to go with George? Are you going to go with John? Roten.
So it's basically an AEC.
It's basically an AEC, yes. Like,
We go both ways on how it affects the negative.
it could be a negative change or a positive change, if that's what you're asking. Prove it.
Who ordered the White House to be built? Who decided that those two did that?
I think it was Washington, but I'm going to look that up so that I'm sure I did. Okay? Alright, so what we're going to do now is you're going to do study guide. Okay? And you have about 20 minutes to do your study guide. And I'm going to give it to you and I'm going to let you work on it as a group. Okay? And then it's due. It's got to be completed in 20 minutes and then I'll give you the answer key after that. So, Carruthers, turn on the lights.